Borderlands 4 is a looter shooter, and it's got a lot of guns. How many guns, you say? Well, in an interview shortly before release, the art director said there are over 30 billion unique combinations, which is around 10 million guns per citizen of Kairos. Now, putting aside statistics I made up because the Kairos census still won't return my calls, you're going to be getting a lot of guns as random drops, and it might not be immediately obvious which ones are good. So today I'm going to go over the basics of guns in Borderlands 4, talk about different manufacturers, what they bring to the table, and hopefully, next time you kill a splash zone, get a giant explosion of loot, you'll know which guns to keep and which ones to junk. So first up, there are 5 different types of guns in Borderlands 4. Shotguns, which tend to be high damage, have a low fire rate, and many of them shoot a spread of pellets rather than a single projectile. Submachine guns that send a storm of bullets at your enemies with an absolutely blistering rate of fire. Assault rifles, the more well-balanced gun. This tends to fall towards the mid-range when it comes to damage, rate of fire, magazine capacity. Sniper rifles hit hard and have excellent critical damage. Just aim for an enemy's head if you want to see big numbers. However, they also generally have a low rate of fire and a limited magazine capacity. Last but not least, pistols are a pretty versatile group. Personally, I find that I use them mostly as a backup weapon, with both the Torgue pistol and the Daedalus pistol being some of my favorites. Now, as one note, heavy weapons are not considered guns. These take up your ordnance slot, they do not consume ammunition, and instead they have a cooldown very similar to a grenade. And I'm going to be sticking to guns in this video because it's already long enough, and just like guns, ordnances are pretty complicated. Also, with that said, there is a ton of variants for guns in Borderlands 4. So everything I've talked about thus far, you can probably find an exception with the right combination of manufacturer and licensed parts. A good example of this, Ripper shotguns fire very quickly, but have much lower damage to go along with a full auto effect. In addition, guns have different rarities, ranging from a common gray all the way up to the gold legendary items. A gun's rarity determines the number of mods it can roll. So in general, higher rarity means better, but always check the item carefully because a well-rolled rare gun is going to be way better than a poorly rolled epic gun. Legendaries work a little bit differently. They have a legendary affix, such as the superheated effect on the superconducting plasma coil. This appears on all copies of a legendary and provides a unique effect. But, just like with epic guns, they can roll other random mods that may make them perform better or worse. In the case of a plasma coil, it's the ability to fire a burst of elemental orbs. There's a ton of different legendaries you can find, but so far I found them to be a mixed bag, with some being a huge disappointment and others like the plasma coil or TK's wave being pretty great options. You'll also find guns with elemental damage pretty frequently. Maliwan is the elemental manufacturer and allows you to swap your gun between 2 different elements. Now, kinetic damage performs identically no matter what enemy health bar you use it against, but elemental damage performs differently based on the health bar. At lower difficulties, this isn't very impactful, but on hard or ultimate Vault Hunter, you get up to a 75% damage bonus or a 50% damage penalty. To simplify, use incendiary damage against flesh, which is the red health bars, use shock or radiation against shields, which is the blue health bars, and use corrosive or cryo against armor, which is the yellow health bars. If you want to know more of the details, the exact bonuses, etc., then check out Maxwell's Elemental Damage Guide, which I'll link down in the description below. Now, in addition to everything I've mentioned so far, each gun has a manufacturer, and each manufacturer has a different specialty. So a Jakobs gun is going to feel very different from a Maliwan or a Vladof. This starts with basic properties. A great example of this is how Jakobs guns hit hard but have a limited magazine, and a lot of them remind me of a revolver. Vladof guns, on the other hand, have a very high rate of fire, often involving multiple barrels, but much lower accuracy, so it can be difficult to get bullets on target. Manufacturers also have a unique effect, and they even license parts out to apply that effect to other manufacturers' guns. Sometimes these licensed parts override each other. On Maliwan guns, for example, the elemental swap is an underbarrel, so if you get a Maliwan gun with an underbarrel, it will override your ability to swap between 2 different elements. And so now let's get into each of the manufacturers and some of the effects they give. Starting with Jakobs, whose special effect is that when you deal a critical hit, such as by shooting an enemy in their weak point, the projectile from a Jakobs gun ricochets and is very likely to take out a nearby enemy. If you want to apply this effect to guns from other manufacturers, look for one with a Jakobs licensed accessory. This is especially potent if you have a way to consistently land critical hits on an enemy. Personally, I found myself using Jakobs guns a lot so far in my playthrough. It's always very satisfying to see big chunky damage numbers. The guns feel great to use, and particularly at lower levels, I got a lot of insta-kill headshots with them. Starting around UVH, they begin feeling a little bit weaker, but if you get a Jakobs throwing knife that forces all of your crits for a duration to be criticals, well, all of a sudden they're feeling great again. Next up we have Torgue. These guns fire explosive shells that deal splash damage, and there are two modes, Impact and Sticky. Torgue Impact detonates when making contact with an enemy or terrain, dealing splash damage, making it easy to hit moving targets, and excelling at breaking vile enemies, or at least their crystals. Torgue Sticky shoots a gyrojet that gets stuck on enemies or terrain, exploding for massive damage when you reload or switch the gun's mode. Torgue Sticky lets you pre-stack a bunch of damage on an enemy, then apply buffs or debuffs before swapping modes for an explosion. Now, I didn't like a lot of the base Torgue guns. Instead, I preferred Torgue licensed parts on a different gun, such as a Vladof SMG with sticky gyrojets. That way I could dump my mag and watch all the stickies explode. But if I didn't have another AoE weapon available, I always made sure to keep a Torgue weapon on hand just to deal with crystals on vile enemies. Next up we have Tediore, which turns its guns into grenades, or at least ordnance-like objects when you reload. There are several versions of this on different Tediore weapons. Sometimes you can shoot the gun after throwing it for a large explosion, throw a second gun on reload, or throw a gun that explodes releasing MIRV grenades. Oh, and occasionally you even get to throw a gun that just continues shooting enemies. Of course, Tediore licenses its technology out to allow for even more gun grenade conversions among its competitors' products. I don't have particularly strong feelings about most of the Tediore guns. I like the way the assault rifle shoots, but for the rest, I'll either use them or I won't, depending on the stats. If you can consistently land or detonate the thrown gun, they do phenomenal burst damage, but you also need to be careful because if you're too close to an enemy when you reload, the explosion's going to damage you and probably knock you as well. Next we have Ripper. These guns charge for a short duration before firing on full auto. They have lower damage than most other manufacturers, a larger magazine, and yes, the higher rate of fire. This applies to Ripper shotguns and snipers as well. Both have significantly lower damage than what you'd typically find, but a way bigger magazine capacity, which completely changes how the gun plays. And you can get the same effect with a Ripper licensed magazine on any other manufacturer's guns. Now, on some guns, especially the sniper, I found the delay a bit frustrating. When I'm sniping, I want the damage to be instant. I want to click and watch their head explode. On the other hand, it is quite good on the other Ripper weapons, as the high rate of fire chews through enemy health bars at least until you run out of ammo. Though if you have a way around that, such as not expending ammo, recovering ammo, etc., then it gets pretty spicy. Speaking of high rate of fire, Vladof guns also have a very high rate of fire thanks to their multi-barrel designs, with their downside being lower accuracy. The SMG, for example, absolutely burns through enemy health bars nearly as fast as it burns through your SMG ammunition. And Vladof licenses its barrels out through the additional barrel alternative fire, meaning the blisteringly fast rate of fire is going to be enjoyed by any other manufacturer. I have to say, I quite like the Vladof SMGs, and I found them very effective at inflicting status effects. With a lower accuracy, I tended to use these guns at close range, or looked for a Hyperion licensed grip to increase my accuracy as I continue to fire. While the status damage isn't the highest, in fact Maliwan shotguns have a much higher status damage, it is very good for getting the effect up and proccing any bonuses against enemies inflicted with a status. It now seems like a really good time to talk about Maliwan, because Maliwan is the elemental manufacturer. All of Maliwan's weapons deal elemental damage by default, and typically they have the ability to swap between two different elemental types. Because elemental damage is more effective at higher difficulties, and each type is more or less effective against certain health bars, having flexibility is good. You generally don't want to just have one elemental gun, you want to have several and rotate through them as the fight requires. So what I did is I tried to keep an incendiary weapon on hand to deal with flesh, a shock weapon to deal with shields. If I could get an incendiary shock Maliwan, that's even better. Last up, I would grab a cryo weapon. This is because cryo is both good against armor, and it has the secondary utility bonus of being able to freeze enemies. Since it isn't as penalized against flesh, I could certainly use it against an armor/flesh health bar, and just go ahead and keep blasting without worrying about if I was or wasn't losing that much damage. I don't gain the 75% bonus, I just am not inflicted with a 50% penalty either. Next up, Order, which is by far my least favorite type of gun. Order guns can be charged to fire multiple rounds at once. And yes, they have solid base stats, but the charge gimmick often left them feeling bad to play. This is especially notable for Order assault rifles, as these do not fire smoothly. You need to either press the button rapidly or charge and release for bursts of damage. Overall, I don't enjoy how the charging feels, so I didn't use them too frequently. The one exception to this is if it has a Ripper licensed magazine, the charge and then auto fire overrides the order's charge and then fire multiple bullets, which completely changes how the guns play. You just hold down left click until you fire, and then you're going on full auto. So if I found one of these with other effects that I liked, I'd put it on. Daedalus allows you to switch between two different ammo types, and initially, I believed that this did not affect a gun's basic properties like damage or fire rate. But after I released the original version of this video, I got a couple comments saying that I had made a mistake, and it did indeed change the rate of fire and damage for the gun. First up, thank you, because this led me to retest with a wider variety of guns, and what I found is really interesting. Another change is this time I was using Bullet Sponge for consistency. And the first weapon I tested was a pistol with an SMG swap. And whether I was using pistol mode or SMG mode, the results were almost identical. But there was a slight difference: 1,151 damage with pistol ammo and 1,140 with SMG ammo. So next, I tried a Fang assault rifle. This can swap between assault rifle ammunition and shotgun ammunition. And in assault rifle mode, it hit for 868, which aligns pretty well given the gun's tooltip. But in shotgun mode, it hit for 1,406 damage. Not only was this damage significantly higher than assault rifle mode, but when using shotgun ammo, it also had a higher rate of fire, with the big downside being that the shotgun ammo is more limited than the assault rifle ammo. And so then I tried a few other guns, swapping between different ammo types to see how each felt. And my conclusion is as follows: Daedalus guns, and guns with Daedalus licensed parts, can gain a significant damage boost or rate of fire increase from the ammo swap, and it is sometimes better to use the alternate ammo over the base ammo. This also means that Daedalus guns and guns with Daedalus licensed parts are some of the most random guns in Borderlands 4, with some of them being really meh and others being pretty great. I would definitely recommend keeping an eye out for Fang assault rifles that have the option to use shotgun ammo. In addition to this, I find a lot of the base stats for Daedalus guns are pretty good, especially the burst fire weapons, which is the pistols and the SMGs. This way you get a good burst of damage and extremely manageable recoil. Now, in addition, there are a few other manufacturers, but guns from Hyperion, COV, and Atlas haven't quite made their way to Kairos yet. Instead, you can find other guns with parts licensed from these manufacturers. And so here are a few examples of what you can expect. First up, for COV, there's the COV licensed magazine. An unlimited magazine size, but the gun heats up as you fire, and if the heat gets too high, it eventually breaks. This essentially triggers an extra long reload animation. So I found COV guns are an acquired taste. The heat can be annoying to manage in firefights, as you need to keep an eye on your weapon, but there are some times where you actually get a lot more damage out of a COV gun because you can fire it more times before you have to deal with a break animation. Next up, there's Hyperion, which has the Hyperion licensed shield and Hyperion licensed ricochet shield. I found these to be pretty useless, honestly. The more interesting one is the Hyperion licensed grip, where accuracy increases as you fire. It's especially good for low accuracy, high fire rate weapons, such as Ripper and Vladof. From Atlas, you've got tracker darts. This marks enemies and causes your projectiles to home in on them for a duration. If you're bad at aiming, Atlas is your best friend. Also, there are a few other target lock effects, darts, grenades, etc., but I'm just calling them all darts for the sake of keeping things simple. Last up, I want to talk a little bit about alt fire and underbarrel effects. This is a special secondary mode that you can find on quite a lot of guns, and it is often very effective. My favorite underbarrel is the spread launcher. It fires out 5 grenades in a bit of a V shape, and these grenades shotgun an enemy at close range. The damage on this is absurd, and with the right setup, it can insta-kill bosses. The fact of a grenade shotgun, also handily enough, makes it easy to remember how to get one, as this underbarrel spawns on Jakobs shotguns. Beam tossers are also pretty good. They take a bit of aiming and definitely do better on larger enemies, but who doesn't want to slice their foes to bits using lasers? I believe this one spawns on Maliwan shotguns, but it's pretty rare, so you might have to farm for a few hours if you want to get one. Now, in terms of the more common underbarrels, tasers and flamethrowers are both a nice way to deal with shields and flesh respectively. Then either shotgun or rocket attachments are a good way to add bursts of kinetic damage to deal with a badass or blow away a health bar that you don't quite have an effective element against. There's lots of options here, so if you get a new underbarrel, just put the gun on, shoot an enemy. If it feels good, keep it. Otherwise, toss it out and junk future copies. And so that's the basics on how guns work, along with a bit of information on the different manufacturers you're going to encounter on Kairos. If you want a deeper dive with more information, then head over to Maxwell to check out the full written guide that's a companion to this video. On the other hand, if you're looking for more Borderlands content, get subscribed or check out my last video where I talk about a great early game farming spot. For now, I need to get back to Kairos because I think a Ripper just said something rather insulting and I need to introduce him to my little friend. So, thank you very much for watching to the end. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, and with that, I'll see you in the next one.